Well, good morning and welcome to Bedford Alliance Church. We are so glad that you are here with us this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Connor, and I am the new youth pastor here at the church. And because I'm kind of the new guy on the block, the staff thought it'd be a good idea if I came up and shared my testimony with you. Now, one fear I had in sharing my testimony was that I would come up here and kind of ramble on about details that didn't seem very relevant to you all. So what I've decided to do is to share my testimony of how I came to you here at Bedford Alliance Church. And this version of the story will cover significant details of my past, but they'll be covered in such a way that it leads to here and now and why I'm standing before you today. So let's get started. That's me. It all started in 1990. For those of you still counting on your fingers, I am 22 years old, the youngest pastor hired ever. Okay, I'm still kind of scratching my head on why I'm here, but I'm really glad I'm here. I would like to point out that I'm a little bit of a trendsetter. I was wearing my hat to the side before it was cool. So I hope you guys appreciate that fact about my life. This is my family. My mother and father, who was actually raised, my dad was raised on the mission field. He grew up in Southeast Asia. Me in the middle, my brother Keith, and sister-in-law Sarah, and everyone's favorite member of the family, Duke, there at the bottom. Keith and Sarah, I'm going to talk with you briefly about them for a minute. Keith is currently serving as associate pastor in Southern California. His wife is a nurse. They have recently been approved by our denomination, the Christian and Missionary Alliance, to go and serve in Thailand as full-time missionaries. My brother wants to do church planting. My sister's a nurse. They're going to make a fantastic team. So they're going to Thailand next summer, Lord willing. Pastor, I remembered your sermon last week. Lord willing, they're going to Thailand next summer, and we're really excited about that. And one thing we're going to do as a church is we thought it'd be really cool to put a face to missions for our congregation, and we're going to follow them on their journey as they prepare to go to the mission field, and then as they set out, and then as they start serving in Thailand. So we're going to follow their journey via Skype primarily, and our first introduction to them will actually be next Sunday at our congregational meeting at 4 o'clock. So be here for that. We're going to interview them, and we're just going to follow their journey. So I'm really excited about that, but I'm biased. Nonetheless, we'll get going with the story. I was born in the greater Seattle area. I went to a private Christian school in Bothell, Washington called Cedar Park Christian. I went there up through the 8th grade, and while I was there, I started to sense a strong call in my life to ministry. I'll tell you one story about how this occurred, but there's more to it than this. I had a Bible teacher. His name was Mr. Allen, a very large Italian man. Wonderful guy, knew the Bible inside and out, and knew the Bible in such a way that it inspired other people to know their Bible. And I remember one night after school, I was in my parents' bedroom, and I was sitting on this little sofa bench that they had. And I remember just kind of this overwhelming sense that perhaps I was supposed to do what Mr. Allen did, and teach the Bible. And I remember at that young age thinking, like, this is abnormal. Not in the way that maybe a kid would aspire to be a police officer or a fireman. Like, this felt weird. This felt strange. And even at that young age, I was like, I think this might be the Spirit of God. Well, the next day, fast forward about 15 hours later, I was sitting in Mr. Allen's class. And as I often did after the lecture ended, I went up to Mr. Allen to ask him a question. I don't remember what it was. It didn't matter. Instead of answering my question, Mr. Allen totally disregards it. He looks me in the eyes and he says, Connor, are you feeling called into ministry? I look back and I'm like, yeah, I think I am. He then responds with another question. He goes, Connor, how do you think I know that? I told him I didn't know, and he said, the Spirit of God just told me you are. And that was kind of the beginning of a long process of the Lord confirming in my heart that I'm called into ministry. Well, after middle school, my family made a big change. We actually relocated and moved to Costa Rica. This is the point in the story where I think you all begin to feel very sorry for me. This is a picture from my back deck, actually. So geographically, I was a little spoiled. But despite the natural beauty of Costa Rica, my time spent there was actually the most challenging in my life. And many of you, I think, will be able to relate to this, but I was completely uprooted from where I'd come from. I was comfortable with a certain group of friends, a certain group of culture, and I had a great Christian community. And all of a sudden, that completely changed overnight. I was in a new place with new people and a new value system. And my school there, called Country Day School, where I attended, it was an English-speaking college prep school, was exceedingly secular. I remember just that drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and just sexual promiscuity was just rampant, and the party lifestyle was big. And for the first time in my entire life, I was up against a crossroads. There was two paths before me. There was one, the path of conformity, where I could kind of give in, compromise my faith, and live like everybody else did and feel accepted. Or there was another path that seemed to be the path called isolation, where I could cling to my values and cling to my faith, but I would have to face loneliness. Now, I want you to think back to when you were in high school. That's not hard for me because that was like a month ago. But I think the hardest thing a young person can feel is the feeling of being alone. And that's the situation that I face. Now, I don't want to trick you all into thinking that I've been the perfect young person this morning, because I'm the first to admit I'm not. I've made some terrible decisions in my life that I deeply regret. But here at this moment, in this crossroads, with these two paths before me, the Lord gripped my heart in such a way that I could do nothing else but commit my life to Him. And so I committed my life to Christ. My faith grew throughout high school, but I was lonely, and it was really difficult. Well, I couldn't wait to get out of high school, and I felt the Lord was calling me to go to Bible college. And so I actually graduated a semester early. I went to a school in Italy, right near Venice. I was spoiled once again, geographically. And then I transferred to Moody Bible Institute, a well-established Bible college in the Chicago area, where I would later graduate with a double major in Bible as well as evangelism and discipleship. And during my time at Moody, I actually had a really neat opportunity to serve as a part-time youth director at a local church in the area, Naperville Congregational Church. While I was there, I think the Lord kind of began to call me into full-time ministry regarding youth specifically. Up until that point, I wasn't sure. I kind of wanted to work with adults, but I felt the Lord was saying something to me along the lines of this: is Connor, at this unique stage in your life, you are old enough to where kids look up to you and respect you, but young enough to where they really relate to you and they feel comfortable around you, want to be around you. And I think at this time in your life, Connor, you are going to be most effective in youth ministry. And so that was kind of a little course correction for me, but one I am excited about. And I started sending out my resume to different churches who were looking for full-time youth pastors. One such church was Grace Church. Grace is actually part of our denomination. They are a mega church in Cleveland, and they were hiring a youth pastor. Well, like everybody else, I sent my resume to Grace, and as you will soon see in the story, by God's sovereign hand on the situation, I made it down to their final two applicants in this process. Now, this process took months, and they finally flew me out. I went through an extensive interview process, and I still remember one of the last questions they asked me before they dropped me off at the airport. They're driving me to the airport, and they say, "Hey, Connor, if we hire you, when can you start?" And I'm like, "Sweet, right on, like, this is a great question." And they told me, they're like, "Hey, we're just going to have one meeting to decide between you and our last candidate, and we're going to get back to you in the next 2-3 days. You'll be hearing from us soon." So I'm like, this is wonderful. I'm not going to have to wait and stress it. But I do remember being in the airport after they dropped me off, about to fly home to my last semester of Bible school. I remember giving it to the Lord and just saying, "God, this situation is in your hands. Like, I don't want to be anywhere where you're not calling me to be. I give it to you." Well, a couple days go by, and then a couple more, and I'm like still waiting for this phone call. Finally, I get a call from Pastor Steve McKnight at Grace Church, and he says, "Connor, I'm so sorry for the delay. This process took way longer than we were anticipating. Our board was actually split on who we wanted to hire between you and this other candidate, and what was anticipated to only have to take one meeting actually took 3. In the end, we decided to go with the other candidate because we felt that his set of gifts better suited the needs of our team." And I remember feeling, some initial disappointment, and I'm on the phone with Pastor Steve McKnight of Grace Church, and I tell him, I'm like, "Pastor Steve, of course, after going through this process, I feel some disappointment in making it, so far, but I've been praying for you, and I know God has a plan for Grace Church and for my life, and I wish you nothing but the best moving forward." So after graduation, I actually accepted a full-time internship at a church in northern Colorado called Foundations Church. They are a brand new church of about 1,500 people, and they didn't have anybody working with their youth. So I stepped into this picture and basically started running their youth group. After about 2 weeks of being there, I received a call from a man named Pastor Ryan of Bedford Alliance Church. Pastor Ryan had received my name from Pastor Steve McKnight at Grace. I came highly recommended to him. Well, I did a phone interview, and then I flew out, and the rest is now history. I now stand before you today as the youth pastor of Bedford Alliance Church. And honestly, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Thanks. Thank you very much. But I want to do more than simply just tell you my story this morning, because it's nice, it's good to hear, but I hope my story applies to you all as well in this way, that despite seemingly bad circumstances and situations, God is at work in ways that are sometimes unseen to us to bring about our greatest good. Romans 8:28, a verse that many of you will be familiar with, says this, that in all things, God works together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. And friends, that's a promise, not just for me in my life, but for you as well. May God richly bless you, and thank you for making me feel so welcome here.